You are listening to the Showbiz Side Hustle Podcast, powered by PerformerPreneur. I am your host here, Nicole Louise Geddes, and together we'll be delving into all of the ways that a showbiz side hustle can support you now and long into the future. So sit back, relax, and listen in, and together let's get inspired to take action to create the life, future, and business of your dreams. This episode is sponsored by the Showbiz Side Hustle Handbook, available on Kindle and in paperback over on Amazon. Follow the simple tasks laid out over 3 easy-to-action sections and effectively build a strong business foundation for a successful showbiz side hustle. Hello everybody, welcome back. It's another episode of the Showbiz Side Hustle Podcast, where this week I'm bringing to you an expert who has, just like you, been in the professional dance world, but has pivoted to do something completely different, but also so important to what I feel my listeners need. So let me please introduce you to a wonderful friend, Kat. Kat, say hello.
Hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today, Nicole.
No, it's brilliant. I'm so privileged that you're going to join us because I know that you have a whole host of information and experience that I just think my listeners at this point in their journey will really need to know and understand. And the skills and the things you're going to talk about today will be things that people can take with them for a lifetime, right?
I hope so. Let's see what comes up.
So first of all, let's just introduce you and your business as is, and then we'll go back a little way to tell the listeners what you did before this big change in your kind of career and direction.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so I'm a psychotherapist, and some people might know what that means. Some people can be really put off or worried about what psychotherapist is. So I'm here to kind of break down some of those barriers of what psychotherapy means. So within my role as a psychotherapist, I'm here as a therapist to help anybody with common mental health difficulties, and that can be a whole range from anxiety disorders. When we talk about anxiety disorders, big umbrella, and underneath that umbrella there can be very specific types of anxiety, so like social anxiety, maybe emetophobia, maybe phobias in themselves, or like general anxiety as well. And then I also work with depression, and my specialist interest is working with trauma, so working with post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm dual trained. I'm trained in cognitive behavioural therapy, which gets abbreviated down to CBT, which is really popular at the moment. And I'm also dual trained in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That gets abbreviated down to EMDR, which again is a big buzz topic at the moment of working with trauma. So I can use both those approaches when I'm working with an individual to sit with them and work alongside them about what their current difficulties are with their mental health, how that's impacting on them in various ways. Maybe that's with their career, maybe that's family life, maybe that's them progressing in certain areas, maybe it's just feeling really bad. And we work together to about their goals, very, very idiosyncratic, so making sure it's really meaningful for that person. And I employ and bring online those different techniques and tools in CBT and EMDR to work with an evidence base to be shown that it's effective for the majority of people to get to their recovery and their wellness. And it's such a beautiful form of therapy to work alongside people to support that, to support their wellness and recovery.
And
so that's me.
Everybody watching and listening can see and feel the calm that you will bring to that as well. So we will obviously give everybody the information as to how to contact you if they feel after this episode it's something that they would like to look further into. And let's just jump back to before this career change. I did allude to the fact that you were in the dance world. You were aspiring to be a professional performer. You were already training. You had performed professionally whilst in training, but something did happen that made you have to pivot. So the listeners and I are big on pivoting. That's kind of what the podcast is about. What's next? What can you do? Sometimes we make those choices. Sometimes those choices are made for us. So please do share your story about being in the industry and what came about.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been a dancer for since being little, being in ballet classes all the way through my life, and especially my teenage years, dance classes in my local community. I went to a masked theatre school, which was incredible, and trained in contemporary and tap and ballet and street and hip hop, and oh my goodness, it was just my absolute passion. I was really lucky enough to have such a wonderful group of girls around me at that time as well. And I think it was just wonderful. And we trained on Fridays as well, which if we can all remember way back to when we're teenagers, committing at a weekend is a big deal. And there was a group of us and we trained in cabaret. And so we'd do shows in the local community and dinner dances, that kind of thing. It was really, really special. And they're still wonderful friends of mine now. Some of them are remaining in the dance industry and some not so much. So that was me, and I had aspirations to go on to dance college, and I was training and training. I got a big injury on my knee, which stopped me, and really had to make some different changes and decisions in my path and my kind of dreams and aspirations, which was a big hurdle to overcome because it went from being dance being my life, my passion, my dream, my thoughts of the future, to then actually needing to reassess. And I think on that journey, what was really interesting is I completely disconnected from anything to do with dance or performing. I found it really painful. I found going even to like the West End, which was something that I loved doing and still do now. But I going to the West End, seeing shows, seeing other performers, living that dream, and living that dream. I found that really painful to do. So there was a period of time where I couldn't even bring myself to go watch shows or, even enjoy dance recreationally. That was tricky for me. Luckily, I overcame that hurdle. I think because I reconnected with other passions of mine, which gave me the same. I think when we're thinking about change, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a little bit now, but when we're thinking about change, it's important to think about what does that aspect give you? So, what did dance give me? It gave me a purpose, it gave me a sense of belonging, it gave me connection with other people. And so when we're thinking about change, it's really important to consider what are those aspects that hobby or that passion had for you, and how can you find that somewhere else? And for me, I was also really interested in psychology. And so I went down the psychology route. I went to university, did my undergraduate in psychology, went on with postgraduate courses, and finally, after many years, became a psychotherapist with my training that I have now. And that does give me a similar sense of belonging and purpose. It also does give me that sense of connection as well. So I think it does tick those boxes in a different way, in a really, really different way. And I think because I felt fulfilled in that way, I was able then to reconnect in with dance and performance more being recreational, adjusting those expectations of myself. And I was then able to join the local salsa class and have a wonderful time, and enjoy it. And was able to, go into adult hip hop classes as a participant, just in the class. And I think that's been really useful to do. And now I can go and watch shows and just enjoy it for the art and the love of it, rather than having that devil on my shoulder, I guess, sort of like criticizing and beating myself up and thinking of that what if, that, unlived dream. So hopefully that gives you a little flavour of how I had to pivot.
That's a beautiful and heartbreaking story, and one that so many of us can relate to for different reasons. When we are at that final curtain call for whatever reason, we feel all of those things that you've just said. We're disconnected, we've lost our identity, we feel like we've failed. It's really, you've said that really eloquently, and I'm sure I'm not the only one listening that got goose pimples and knows and understands those feelings too. You did touch on the word change, and when you and I were speaking about how and what we bring to the podcast today, it was that word that kept coming up for us. I really would like this episode to give the tools and the techniques and the reassurance that change for whatever reason, be that because you've chosen it or because it's, happens out of your control, is manageable. And Kat, listeners, is the perfect person, as you can already hear, to talk us through those feelings, those emotions, and those techniques to understand that change and to do exactly what Kat has just beautifully described, to embrace the change, to take what we know and love and pivot it and change it and find the joy elsewhere. And that might be still in performing, but in a different avenue. And the Showbiz Side Hustle podcast, Kat, as I'm sure you know because you're listening along with your background, is just giving the listeners as many tools, as many ideas, a safe space to go through the emotions, to go through the twists and the turns of turning into an entrepreneur, to maybe stay in the performing world a bit longer if they choose, whatever. But change is definitely on the horizon for everybody at some point in their career and life. So talk us through what you think my audience needs to know to be the best version they can be when they're hitting that monumental moment of change.
Oh wow, big question. I will answer that for sure, but I just think like when we think of change, we are all going through those changes, aren't we? There's change happening all the time. I think this is really topical at the moment for us as part of the military community. I don't know how much you have shared with your listeners around your military connections, but that's how you and I have kind of met, and I'm thankful for that. Change is really topical at the moment, with international relocations and changing of jobs and moving house and all of these really stressful things. So when you invited me on today to talk about change, I just thought, well, this is live. We're living this at the moment. And I think alongside that, us being women needing to or being forced to, or society making us needing to make changes around becoming mothers and how that affects our careers as well, rightly or wrongly, whether we have much input in that or not. But there's huge changes there as well, becoming parents and making the changes to make more of a family life and how that affects what we can and can't commit to. There's big changes around that. So I think change is happening all the time as we grow, as we evolve. And I guess, what are you asking me to focus a little bit more on, like those, like you said, that curtain call change, these like big moments of change where we're making a decision to move away from or changing into something else. Yeah, that's their tricky times, aren't they?
Well, and I guess that's my ignorance and my kind of naivety. I don't know. Does the same toolkit serve us at these kind of very, very normal, exciting new moments and change, as well as when we've got those big decisions that kind of stepping out of our comfort zone, all encompassing kind of want to hide in a dark room change? So that's a question back at you. Is it the same toolkit? Do we need to do and think the same? Is it a same starting point, or are they two completely different things?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think change, it's really, I used that word earlier, idiosyncratic. What I mean by that, it's really down to the individual. It's so tailored and so personal, because with one person, change can feel so overwhelming, so out of control. And lots of us don't like that feeling of being out of control. So it's thinking about what can we do in those moments to gain a sense of calm, or gain a sense of certainty in an uncertain situation. That tends to be what brings up anxiety for all of us. I sometimes use, when I'm working with my clients, like an analogy about having an allergy to uncertainty when we're thinking about feeling anxious. So if you think like using a reference with, say, I don't know, if you have hay fever, you have the allergy to hay fever. And if there's a drop of pollen in the environment, we can then react to that pollen with our allergy. And I think the same can be applied when we're thinking about uncertainty. If there change brings about so much uncertainty, doesn't it? In whatever domain we're thinking about, whether that is a career, whether that is changing social groups because of that career, which becomes, especially in the performing world, which is your identity, it's your everything. When we think about making those changes, the uncertainty drop in our environment can be so big. And so if we use that allergy thought around it, we can then have like an allergic reaction, so to speak, to that uncertainty. So we can feel really anxious, we can feel really out of control, we can have all those physical body sensations, which heart rate, feeling sick, churning tummy, not being able to sleep. I would say all of that would be part of, maybe irritability. All of that can be part of that reaction to uncertainty. And I think if you think of a continuum, we're going to respond to that uncertainty really differently, depending on our personalities, depending on our support structure, depending on how much control we think we have on these changes, depending whether that change has been thrust upon us through injury or ill health or financial circumstances, or whether that change is because we're really motivated to do that, and that comes from like a real desire and passion. Change is going to be so different for everyone as an individual.
Is there a cycle of change that we should observe in order to help us kind of breathe through all of those things you said? Because I can, personally, I feel those feelings and they change as like you would with an allergy, as you start to address them, the changing feelings change, sorry. So I'm guessing there's some kind of, we're not always going to be in the deep, dark depths of these fears and these feelings. Could you open up about some things like that might kind of help us just remember that there's always an end to the cycle?
Yeah, for sure. No, there is actually a cycle of change. So I don't know if you read my mind or something there, but from using like a psychological approach again to how we work with change. And again, we use this template for whatever change we're talking about, whether that is career, whether that is stopping the career, whether that is moving, whatever. We can use the same template. So I will share this with you. So maybe you can add it on to your resources at the end. But from using this psychological template and understanding of cycle of change, there's different kind of steps, so to speak, in being able to make the change. So it starts off with pre-contemplation. So what do you think pre-contemplation is about? What would that mean?
The decision,
Yeah, it would be even before the decision. No intent of making a change, no intent of making a change to a behaviour. It's where you might not even know that there's a change coming up. Completely not even in this kind of idea of making a change. Pre-contemplation, not even thinking about it. First step. We're always going to have a period of maybe calm, stability, drudgery, run-of-the-mill life. Pre-contemplation, that's that. Change isn't on the horizon. We then move into contemplation. So this is where we're sort of aware that there's, a problem or there's a change that's going to be made. And we're aware that we're going to have to start committing to that change. So that's the contemplation. That's the thought process. That's the thinking about it. Yeah. Then we move into preparation. So in preparation, that's where we're kind of having like an intention to act, an intention to problem solve, an intention to take action to address the problem. Maybe that's researching stuff. Maybe that's looking into new jobs. Maybe that's making that decision to leave, hand your notice in, make changes. We then move into action. So this is where we start to change and modify our behaviour. We start to make that change. We put it into action. And you're really committed at that point to doing something different. Doing something different can be really hard. So then this moves into the tricky bit, the maintenance. The next stage is, can we maintain that change? So that can, and I think we can all relate to this, even on a smaller scale, think about trying to make a change with like lifestyle, fitness or diet. This can really apply to that. Yeah, okay, you've thought about it. Yeah, I want to get fitter, for instance. Yeah, okay, you've started to prepare. You know where the gym is. You've got your new gym kit. You've found a time where you can go. Yeah, okay, you've started going. That's great. You're doing well. But it's the maintenance. And that's where lots of us can really slip up. How can we maintain that change? How we can sustain that behaviour? How can we replace old behaviours with new behaviours? That's really tricky, because the old behaviours are kind of stronger. It's what we're used to. So it's easy to slip into old habits and old patterns. So how can we maintain that change? And that's where all the good stuff comes from. The hard work, the graft that you put in. And then it moves into sometimes for us like a relapse. So maybe we fall back into old patterns of behavior because they're stronger. It's what we're used to. They feel more comfy. It's hard to make a change. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it all the time, hey? But change is hard. So we can have a relapse. And then what happens there? We go back into pre-contemplation and the cycle continues. So I think, why is that useful to consider? It's useful to consider that psychologically we all know that there are these stages of change. So if we can identify where we're at those stages, could be really useful to feel quite contained. Like, I can see that I'm here at this stage, pre-contemplation. I don't even want to think about change. Okay, that's where you're at right now. But it might be that we have to move on to contemplation. We have to start thinking about it. It might be that we're maintaining this change. We're working really hard at getting these good results and outcomes, but we know that this can be the tricky time. This can be where we fall off the wagon. This is where relapse happens. Okay, so it's just about holding that model in mind and identifying where you're at in that. That can feel containing in itself, knowing that it's a cycle and it's a step, and knowing that if we make choices which aren't helping us to maintain the change, that's also okay. It's not a fail. It's a relapse, and we can get back on that cycle again. We can keep going. How does that feel? Do you think that fits?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And I think exactly what you said, to understand that cycle and be able to identify where you are. Then I always say every emotion is a clue. That's one of my kind of mottos of my clients. Every emotion is a clue. And if you're on that cycle and you can identify where you are and the emotions you're feeling at that point, you can find the answers either within, or you can go seek them elsewhere through support, through, questions or research, like you're saying, due diligence, like anything that's going to help you to either maintain that space and hold your place on that cycle, as you say, or move you into the next one. Because I also use something called pivot paralysis, like with my clients, like we're just kind of loitering here, like completely paralyzed. We don't know what to do next. And I guess that's, well, I don't guess, it is very normal. But to sit on that cycle,
that's part of it,
where I'm hanging and why, and what can I do and who can I ask for support and help to get us there. So yeah, 100% brilliant information. I think it all goes down brilliantly with the listeners and hopefully help them to identify and then push through. But anxiety is kind of a big thing for everybody, as you said. And on that cycle, some people might love the excitement of the change. Some people might not. Like, that's individual as to where your anxiety fits. I thought for a long time, Kat, that I didn't have much anxiety because I was led to believe that anxiety was a stomach feeling. And then, I knew that I did, but it was like, but I don't have butterflies. I'm slightly digressing here. But somebody once enlightened me, and I always felt like I was going to get a head cold. Like, I just felt it in my head, like I'm going to be poorly, I'm going to be poorly, I'm going to be poorly. And I never actually was poorly. It was that kind of, and that's where my anxiety manifested. And at that point, it kind of gave me permission to understand that, again, like every emotion, everything is a clue, to really understand what that was. Because I was kind of flitting about going, but I feel something, but the world's telling me that's not what it is, because it's not in my stomach. Any thoughts on anxiety that might help people cope or identify it? Obviously, it's a very broad topic, but just any things that you think might be useful today.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for sharing about your own anxiety. I think more of us need to do that. I think we all need to talk really openly about our own mental health and really normalize that. And I think just the awareness of how, again, I used that word, didn't I? Again, like, it's idiosyncratic. It's down to the individual. We all experience things really differently. So there's a common like grouping of physical symptoms which we would understand to be anxiety, but it can manifest itself in any way. So whether that's like a really busy head, like chattering head and can't switch those thoughts off, or like insomnia, not being able to sleep, or being really busy, needing to I know I personally can relate to this. When I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious, I feel like I take on more, weirdly, and then I feel like I'm not keeping on top of anything. And that kind of like constantly busy, that's kind of like how it comes across with me, which makes me feel overwhelmed and a bit out of breath and a bit kind of, that kind of panicky feeling. So anxiety is normal. We're not going to medicalize feeling anxious. It's normal human emotion. I guess where I come in would be if that level of anxiety that the individual is feeling is really impacting on their day-to-day life, really impacting on their mental health. So I think that's important to kind of just spend a little bit of time thinking about, because I'd never ever want us to feel fearful of, because I think there is a lot of fear in our upbringing, in maybe the cultures, I think it's changing, but around good emotions and bad emotions, we really want to break that down. Like, feeling angry has a lot of negative taboo. Feeling anxious or depressed has a lot of negative connotation towards it. But actually, there a whole range of human emotions is healthy for us all to experience. The problem comes when it tips into having a big impact in our life, and that's where psychotherapy can really help with that. So I just would really hope that your listeners can at least take home that understanding that feeling those trickier emotions is completely normal. And when we're thinking about change, making change, starting something new, maybe holding in mind the cycle of change, maintaining it, or having a relapse and falling, making change decisions that mean that we're not working towards those goals anymore, that's going to bring up some emotions for us as well. Whether that's shame, whether that's anger, whether that's anxiety, whether that's sadness, I think all of those emotions will come into play. I don't think it's just anxiety. I think all of that will come into play. And I know for myself, if change comes up, military family, again, pretty good at coping with change, but it can bring up a lot of sadness, because change can sometimes be about loss. So although change can be about gaining, for sure, especially if we're choosing the change, there's going to come loss, whether that is loss of the people that you've been spending a lot of time with, those social connections, those relationships, whether that's a loss of identity, whether that's a loss of time you've invested into something which you're no longer continuing with. There's also a level of loss, and that can feel really sad. And so I think all of those emotions are really valid. Thinking of anger as well, sometimes it can make us feel angry if we're forced upon to make a change. That kind of feeling of unjust or unfair or inequality. So I think all of those feelings are completely normal, completely healthy to have as part of when something is changing, and that drop of uncertainty again is in the environment.
It feels really refreshing, Kat, to hear this. I mean, I have heard this, you and I have had conversations about these things, but I'm sure the listeners will agree. It feels really refreshing to just hear it, just said in such simplicity as well, and normalizing this. And you're right, there's been a lot of years and generations that haven't allowed that to be a normal kind of process, a normal feeling, all of those feelings. I do feel hopefully, our children certainly are going to be growing up in a different world around that. We maybe are probably on the cusp of, we know that there's things that we can get to and do to support. We know we're normal. We know that there's levels of, and hopefully we understand at what point that's kind of tipping into needing some extra support and some extra help. You mentioned your own kind of pattern. My pattern is to retreat. Yours is to get busy. Mine is to be busy, to be doing all the things, but to just retreat and get on, heads down. I feel like and it's VE Day this week, and I feel like I'm a war veteran in that kind of sense, like chin up, get on, just do it. But it leads to a bit of burnout. And I think my listeners, and certainly my clients, will notice in my maybe social media, like, again, every now and again, I just back off because I feel like I've physically done the changes, maintained it for a while, it's now set, and I can breathe, and I retreat, and I take stock, and then start the next cycle of change with the next thing. Any thoughts on that might help the listeners in terms of just dipping into to other cycles that you've seen other clients with, just because when we are listening, I'm sure with all those differences that you said, just might be nice if we pick up on something that might just give somebody a lift or a tip or a tool to do.
I guess what came to mind for me with hearing you say that is, you can maintain something for a certain amount of intensity or time, and then that's when you need to stop and back away. And maybe we could view that in that maintenance part. It would make sense when you've got the visual. So we will share this with your listeners, so they've got the visual alongside this conversation. But so you've got the maintenance for a period of time, and then you can't tolerate that anymore because it's hard. It takes a lot of time and energy and effort. And so then maybe that's the relapse for you. That's where you step back and you don't post and you don't engage, and you need some time out, and that's okay. We need time out, right? So I think with every relapse, or that sounds like maybe quite a harsh word for that, but every time you step back from that and can't maintain that intensity anymore for whatever reasons, I think you learn from it. It's like an upward spiral. So you relapse, take some time off, and then you kind of upward spiral again into, okay, now I'm thinking about making a change again, and maybe I'm going to do this differently. So I think it's healthy to view it as the relapse was a learning time. It's a time of when you retreat, that it can be your topping yourself back up again. That can be your self-care time. That can be your reflection time. What went well in that period of maintaining my new change? What didn't go so well? What made me want to retreat and back away? Was it because I've put too much of my own energy into that? And actually, can I learn from that next time that I don't need to work as hard, or I don't need to work as many hours, or I don't need to put so much into it? It's bringing up like maybe perfectionist traits for me, like striving for this perfection or striving for this standard, which might be tricky to maintain. So can we just lower the expectations? Can we lower the standards a bit for us to be in that maintenance for a little bit longer next time? I guess that's what comes to mind for me.
No, that's brilliant. And it's actually very true. And I hadn't really thought about it. I ask my clients all the time, review and reflect business stuff, numbers, strategies, exactly what you're saying, things that are working well, things that aren't. And actually listening to you, I think subconsciously, I do that in all aspects of my life. And each time there's a change, each time, I'm pulling back, it's for less. It's for less time. And also the maintenance has been longer because I've really started to understand. And so does that come with age, Kat? Does that come with support? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you can see a pattern. But certainly as I've grown older and I've had more time, not necessarily time, but more inclination to really kind of make the best out of everything. How can I be better? How can I learn? Be inquisitive about my own self and patterns. Do you think people, is there certain ages that come to mind for different aspects of mental health? Or no, I already know the answer to that. It's just very personal, isn't it?
Yeah, again, it's really personal. It's really unique to the individual. And I think if we're using that cycle of change, I guess it comes from experience, doesn't that? Every time we're trying something, whether we're in our teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, wherever we're at in that life cycle, the more opportunities we have of trying to maintain a change that's important to us and making some decisions to step away or relapsing, however we want to call it, that's then that period of reflection. And I wonder how long we stay in pre-contemplation. Maybe we can't because of time pressures or financial pressures. Maybe that motivate, or family pressures, whatever. That might motivate us to get back on the change cycle quicker than other people. Each time we're back on that cycle, we're learning, we're refining, we're reflecting, we're making different decisions, and each time it's just a review and reflection period for us, isn't it? Whether we're doing that subconsciously or whether we're doing that with real concerted effort to reflect and review. So I don't know if that's an age thing. I think that might be every time we try something, we're getting more learning and a wealth of information and learning from doing that. So within a change, there's going to be all of these different patterns, aren't there, that is going on for everybody. And I know from some of the worksheets that I've seen that you have shared with your listeners before, you have worksheets of reflecting and reviewing, don't you? Which could maybe be added into today's podcast. So when people maybe find that they're in that pre-contemplation stage or that contemplation stage, they're thinking about change, they can really have a place where they can put their thoughts, they can bullet point their ideas, they can, because it can get really messy in our minds if we're having a lot of thoughts, trying to make decisions, trying to make change, but we haven't documented that. One, it can feel bigger for us than what maybe it actually is. So there's something very therapeutic and cathartic about writing it down, whether that is pen to paper, whether that is drawings, whether that is a vision board, whether that's something, or a notepad online, however it works for the individual, because it's again so different. There's something really important about getting it out your head and get it onto paper. It can feel really relieving mentally to stop that churn constantly, because what tends to happen there is another kind of psychological trait that we can see is we ruminate. So what I mean by ruminate is churn the same thing over and over and over and over again. We're not getting anywhere with it, but it's because we feel like we've got to keep thinking about it to try and problem solve, or we've got to keep thinking about it, otherwise we're not going to remember. So if we just document it, put it down somewhere, that can be really containing and free us up from like that internal chatter that goes on, usually at night time, which stops us sleeping. So that's a really helpful technique, to just pop it down on paper. And I think another thing, I know that you talk about accountability quite a fair bit, and I think there's something that holds us personally accountable if we've got something physically written down as well. So I think that can feel really helpful in then moving towards preparation and taking action on making a change, because we've got something really tangible rather than it being just ideas and thoughts floating around in our minds.
I love that. And it's so aligned with exactly how I coach, without this psychotherapy knowledge that you've just gifted us prior to that. It's even, those nuances of how I coach, get it down, share, be accountable, review, reflect. I'm having a little thought, and I won't keep you much longer because I know you're a busy lady, but I'm having a little thought to the fact that performers, prior to this kind of major pivot into entrepreneurship that they might be considering, I feel like as a performer, many performers would agree that we're quite good at change. We've had to be. But I'd invite everybody listening to just go back to that question. Are you good at change? Like, is it are you doing the best you can each time? Or is it just kind of like a cycle that you are on because the industry kind of pushes us from one job to one audition to another group of performer kind of associates, and we just go through those motions because we have been institutionalized to do that. So I'd invite the listeners to be like, if you're thinking, yeah, I kind of cope with change quite well, just to review and reflect that process that you've been going through for year on year. How can you make it better? What can you now see that could be tweaked? And if listeners, you're listening thinking, gosh, I don't know if I handle this too well, and I'd love some expert advice and support, Kat is absolutely the person to turn to, because as you heard at the beginning, Kat understands the industry and she had that huge change herself, but also very, very intelligent, professional, educated lady that is super passionate about what she does now. So Kat, please do tell the listeners, and I'll pop them in the show notes, how to find you if they were considering a quick chat and then potentially working with you.
Well, thank you for all those wonderful compliments. I feel like, that my ego is definitely increased after those lovely compliments. Thank you for that. Absolutely. I will share I have a web page, I have an Instagram page, an email, so I can share all of those details, and people can just reach out if they, again, thinking about the cycle of change, people might be in the pre-contemplation change, thinking, I don't want to think about this psychological aspect to change or my life, and that's fine. But if people are moving into contemplation or preparation, then you can reach out to me at those points, and then we can take action by making an appointment that's at a convenient time. And hey, if I don't feel like the right fit for your listeners, for whatever reason, then I can still be the person to link in with, and I can help direct you to other psychotherapists in different fields as well. So there's lots of us out there, and I'm linked in with lots of other professionals, so I can help.
Amazing. Just verbally give one of those kind of contact details, so that anyone that's listening and you know, like me, like if I have to go find this information, I probably won't do it, but if I can hear it and I can get on with it there and then, it's a bad toxic trait of mine. So just verbally give us something to go on as well, Kat, there.
Yeah, sure. So if I give you my Instagram handles, that's katcuthbert.psychotherapy. That's my Instagram handle. And then within that, you'll be able to find my email address. You'll be able to find my web link. I've got it all easy. Just one click of a button. There's no excuse. You'll be able to contact me through that. And
I'd love, Kat, just to end full circle back at the beginning, because you said some really beautiful and heartfelt things about, you know, having to leave the industry and finding joy in other ways. And I'd just love a little quick recap of that, because I think so many of us, when we are pivoting into entrepreneurship, kind of, you know, feel that it's going to be a hustle, feel that it's going to be hard work, and it is, but also I'm a big believer in joy in whatever we do. And you'd said you kind of made a conscious effort to match that past joy with a present joy. So just a little recap on some of the skills and some of the things we should think about at that point as well.
Yeah, nice way to recap. So I think when we're making change, what is it about? Try and spend a little bit of time thinking about and putting it down as well, jotting it down. What are the qualities that provides you at the moment? What do you enjoy about that current job, or that current field of working, or that current place that you're working at? What is it that you like from that? What fills your cup up? What tops you up? What do you get joy and pleasure from about that? And then once you can identify what it is about that feels good for you, if you're making a change, it's about making sure that you can find something which is matching those qualities that are important for you as an individual. And then that will help the change feel a lot more manageable, a lot more motivating to do that change, because you know that you're going to be working towards accessing the same qualities that give you joy and pleasure and connection, or whatever it is in your current role. And you'll be able to mirror that and match that across to something different.
I love that. It's exciting, because I think people both in and outside of the performing industry need to know that if you're reaching and striving and hoping to be an entrepreneur, it's absolutely possible. But if you've got joy behind it and you know what that looks like, and you kind of identify it and you can work towards that, you'll be able to sustain your entrepreneur journey much longer, and have much more kind of success with it, I believe. And you have had a wonderful success, and I'm so excited that you have shared your story and how we can work with you, and your tips and your toolkit and your intelligent outlook on life and change with me and the listeners. Kat, it's been brilliant. We could talk all day, I'm sure, but you have got clients this afternoon, so I'm going to love you and leave you. Listeners, please reach out to me, to Kat, to each other, and find the support you need however you need it. And don't do business alone is probably the tagline for today. You've got support, and that will help you to navigate that change as easily and as wonderfully as we can. Okay guys, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you for joining me here on the Showbiz Side Hustle Podcast. So until next time, please do take a little bit of action, that very first step, and make sure that you are doing something for you and your Showbiz Side Hustle this week to move you forward and get you heading quickly and swiftly and strategically towards success.